Disclaimer. To the Pharisees and Karens out there.
How dare you!
All guests on this show do not reflect the opinions of the host. The purpose of this show is to have interesting conversations, stretch our minds, and grow.
Not what we want!
If you are looking for an echo chamber, viewer and listener discretion
is advised.
You talk about extreme.
What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up.
All things continually lead back to serpents, dragons, fairies, Nephilim, and fallen angels.
In the distance looms a mystical mountain.
As Mike Heiser used to say, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's probably important.
At its peak, a great fire burns, concealing the Prometheus Lens.
This development of this knowledge that's being talked about within the mystery schools.
An ancient artifact said to reveal the hidden truth within a deliberately darkened world.
There is a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world.
Join us as we travel and explore the vast unknown. It's a hero's journey with dragons to slay, damsels to save, and innumerable treasures to hoard. Torches high.
The Smithsonian, they caught wind of a giant skeleton, would send their agents out to get it.
But it takes courage to move forward, to move out of the shadows, out of the unreality that we think of as reality.
We are all on the hero's journey.
Mankind has been in contact with and influenced by extraterrestrials.
Leave the Sitchin mound of bull feathers out of it.
You know, look at it from a different perspective.
Hey guys, what is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we are about to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens Podcast, the place where the conversations are always enlightening. And I'm your host, Justin, and here we like to use the allegory of the Prometheus Lens to take a second look at everything. Hey guys, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the hero's journey. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Hey, be sure to check out our socials down below on our various platforms. That would be much, much appreciated. Well, guys, I just told our guest pre-roll, I just had a moment of deja vu. And it's like, this is our little inside joke, but I'll let you guys in on it. Me and this gentleman had a conversation on his show just last night. And we had such a good time, such a good conversation. I invited him over to my house and get some exposure to my audience, because I think you're really going to enjoy this man, his insights and the conversations that we have. We went for close to 3 hours last night, man, and the time just kind of flew by. But I'd like to welcome to the show for the first time, hopefully the first time of many, Tim Constantine from the 6th Century Podcast. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, and like you said, we had a great conversation last night. Felt like I've known you for years almost. Those are the best kind, and these are the best kind of podcasts, I think, where you're here not just to give the people a good episode or what you're trying to do or present as a good episode, but when you're actually like invested in the person on the other side of the screen, these are the best kind, I think.
Yeah, that's something I always tell my listeners is I love getting in front of someone that shares your passion, and shares your excitement and research, because you're sharing ideas with each other. It's an exchange. It's a back and forth, and those are just fascinating. And I think I even mentioned last night on your show, it's the exchanging of puzzle pieces.
Yes, and I think we talked about some stuff last night that I had never heard before. So I was learning as we went. So I can always appreciate that.
Oh yeah, same thing. And you had to pull yourself back a few times, because once I, had worked out for you to come on this show, there was a couple of those items that you wanted to bring up, and you kept pulling yourself back. You're like, I'll just wait. I'll wait till I get on your show.
Yep. Yeah, we'll get into that tonight. I mean, I think our research has moments probably where it'll come to a crossroads. So I'm really interested to see what happens and what develops out of that today.
Well, for those that just not familiar with you and your show, just kind of give everybody a introduction to who Tim is, what kind of show that you run, and just let everybody kind of get a feel for you.
Yeah, I'm Tim Constantine. My podcast is Six Sensory Podcast. I spell it out SIX. I don't use the number 6. I'm on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and I have an Instagram. And I do hidden history, mystery, ancient technology, and I just try to go into things that are kind of either forgotten or we get like a wrong narrative on. I try to clear up some of that stuff. I wouldn't say that I'm too far off from what you do. You probably focus a little bit more on the Bible than I do, but I love that stuff too. So I'm never shy to go into it. I'll definitely touch on Bible stuff on there from time to time as well. But for me, it's just about hidden history. For me, is my thing. That's really what I'm driving right now.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, how long you been doing it, and what got you into this rabbit hole?
I've been doing it. It will be a year in December, and I think it was just a convergence of a lot of things that were happening to me in my life that kind of put me in this stream of podcasting. It put me in the right place at the right time, I guess. 2020, I think I may have told you this yesterday, was my red pill awakening moment. And it was podcasts that were really helping me navigate a lot of the emotions that I was seeing and that I was dealing with from stuff that I was seeing out in the world. I mean, if I didn't have podcasts in 2020, I don't know if I would have, maybe I'd still be kind of like a normie. The podcast helped steer me. I think God was working on me. Like I say, I think it was like a convergence of things. And eventually I just got to the point where I'm like, maybe I should do this. I kept getting these little downloads like, oh, you should be podcasting. Almost like I heard a voice or something. It kind of got a little mystical there for a little bit. I felt like I was kind of being like pulled into it. And then when I decided to start, things just started happening. Like if I needed any kind of advice, there were moments where people would call me up and give me advice, and I didn't reach out to them or ask. So it's like at every step of the way, I had the help I needed to get it going. So it's been a cool journey.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And when we were talking back and forth about coming on your show, you started talking about how, you've been deep diving some things, but you've been on a rabbit trail here recently of the Nazis and Hitler and the whole mysticism and the occult behind Nazi Germany and Hitler. And that was something that I was definitely fascinated with. And I told you on the show the other day that it's funny how you talked about things line up, that a previous guest I had mentioned doing a show with me about that, and they had canceled on me once or twice already. And when you brought that up, I was like, well, I've been primed and waiting for this conversation, so just come on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it worked out. I think this is perfect timing. I really haven't given this information out much. Like, I think I've only done one podcast that touches on kind of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. Like, I love looking into World War II and the Nazis and all that stuff. I've always liked it. And there are so many different little kind of presentations I have on different aspects of this time period and this group of monstrous people, really. I definitely don't glorify them. I'm not into it like that. I don't think that what they did was in any way good. But anyway, I mean, this is just an avenue today, this just kind of the occult backdrop that's ever present behind the Nazis. Like, I'm probably going to go into that some today, and I haven't really done it much. So hopefully this will be something new to everyone.
Well, sweet, man. Well, like I said, this is the hero's journey. So my listeners, they got their hiking boots on and their backpacks on. Lead the way, brother.
All right. I've always been into World War II in a weird way almost. When I was a kid, I would go to college with my dad. My dad was a professor, and we lived way out in the boondocks. If you can't tell by my accent, I'm from Appalachia. So we had like a 30 to 45 minute drive into this university. So if I went to school with my dad, I was there all day. So instead of sitting in classes with him, I would just hang out in the library. And one of the things that I was really into, for whatever reason, was World War II history books. I was just a weird 7-year-old kid that was into this stuff. So it's always kind of been a fascination for me. And I think too, I loved autobiographies as well, because I loved hearing people's real life story. Like we talked about this, where if we were to write, you and I think we mentioned that we wouldn't really ever write a fiction book, probably because we like the real stuff. We like talking about stuff that's really out there and really happening. So I always liked those too. And like with World War II, I feel like it was this very highly impactful event for people, where normal people's lives became very interesting and almost autobiographical. And I remember looking in some of those books when I was a kid. The pictures in those books were not censored like they are today. And it was clear that this war was an event that made average everyday people tap into this greatness that maybe they normally wouldn't have. This is an event that compelled people to do incredible acts. And I think that World War II is just the premier world-altering event of at least the last 500 years. I mean, a lot of big changes we've seen over the last century, and our lives even go directly back to the Nazis.
Yeah, well,
Operation Paperclip.
Drastic times, drastic times call for drastic measures. You had all the young boys, volunteering, going to war, and all those people died. Like you think of Normandy and those documentaries you see, those boats pull up and the gate drops and just bodies all over the place, man. And manufacturing had to step up and supply the war, and then the women had to come out of the houses and go to the factories to keep everything afloat. It was just a desperate time, and people really had to do some gut checking and step up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also propelled us into almost another level of consciousness, I think. And I think even economically, socially, and of course, everything you just listed off, those are all happening at once. So there's just huge nucleus of change happening just across the board, and it's global too. That's the thing. Like everybody on this planet just about was kind of having the same experience, where it's almost like a eternal battle of good versus evil. I don't know if there's ever been a time in history where it's been that clear cut and dry that where people are actually fighting for good against evil. So, and I think too, like one of the biggest things that really pulled me into this story later in life is finding out about Operation Paperclip and looking into that. It wasn't long before I realized that shaped the America that we live in today, because through Paperclip, we got all these Nazi scientists that were ahead of their time, and they really propelled the technology of our nation forward once we got them. And I found,
just for those that's unfamiliar, I just don't want to leave nobody in the dark. I try to assume everybody is an infant and doesn't know anything, just in case. But Operation Paperclip, kind of give an overview of what that is for someone that is clueless on what that is.
Yeah. The leaders in the world in 1946, 1947, right after the official end of the war, realized that the Nazis were cooking with something very advanced. This was a country in the 30s who was burning their money in the streets because it was worthless, because their economy failed. They didn't have an army. 10 years later, they're the world superpower. They're the new empire. It's like, how did they do that in 10 years' time or less? And it's because they had all these brilliant minds. And it's hard to say that when you're talking about Nazis. It's hard to say these were brilliant people because they're Nazis. You don't want to give them any credit, but they really had brilliant people working for them. They were 20 to 30, sometimes even 40 years advanced compared to the rest of the world. So the world leaders, especially your superpowers like us, Russia, and Great Britain, there was this fight to get these brilliant minds right after the war. So, but we had to make it look a certain way. So what the Americans did was they underwent Operation Paperclip, where they snuck these guys into the country. And one of the biggest smokescreens they used was Nuremberg. Nuremberg is this big event on the world stage where we try these guys in front of this tribunal council, and we make it look like we're bringing justice to the Germans for what they did. But they only tried a couple people. So while they're doing this spectacle, I think Nuremberg was a total psyop in this regard. While they're doing this spectacle on the world stage and say, look, we're going to hang some of these guys. Meanwhile, thousands of Nazis are being moved into the country quietly, into our institutions, into our scientific institutions. So that's Paperclip for me. And honestly,
that's where you get all your Warner von Braun and NASA and all this. That's when we basically had our science boom and gained so much knowledge and went into space and just all this, just advancement or explosion would probably be a better word for it, of technology was through these German scientists. And a lot of people, he wasn't a Nazi, but some people fail to realize that they did. They bred some really superior, knowledgeable people. Einstein, was from Germany.
Absolutely. And conflict actually started to brew out of this Operation Paperclip almost immediately because Russia got more Nazis than we did. So that created a degree of competition between us and the Soviets, which in turn fueled the Cold War. And the Cold War and World War II, of course, completely changed the way we did everything from intelligence to warfare. It totally changed the game for us. We started the CIA in 1947 because of this. It was clear in 1947 that the intelligence community was now going to have this role that they never had before, where they're going to start telling Americans how to think, essentially. So but it goes back to World War II. It changed everything. And not to mention our government, there was this fear among people in our government that the Russians were going to become better than us and take our spot as top dog because they got all these Nazis. We were afraid that they were going to become the new superpower. So that competition really shaped our world and the America we live in today.
Hi everybody, I'm Chris Vick. I'm the founder of Squatch Survival Gear, and today I'm here to talk to you about some of our most popular packs. In 2017, I founded Squatch Survival Gear because I was tired of seeing low-quality, mass-produced packs flooding the American market. I decided I'd make a pack that was 100% designed and manufactured in the United States, and today I'm here to talk to you about some of our most popular packs. This is the Night Howler. It was designed for EDC and travelers. As you can see, it's small. It's roughly 10 by 12 inches. It's designed for everyday carry. The pass-through pad allows you to put it on your luggage when you travel. This is the Rougarou. It's very civilianized, lots of attachment points. This is a 25-liter pack. We designed it for a little lighter load. If you need more than the Night Howler, you should try this. This is the Mothman, very similar to the Rougarou, roughly the same size, but it's designed for carrying a much heavier load. The removable waist belt will help you carry that extra load. You've also got your retaining strap if you're going to take that on a travel trip. This is the Kakamora. This would be your first 72-hour pack, as we used to say in the Army. It comes with an internal frame, totally adjustable straps, heavily padded. You can carry heavy loads, carry lots of gear. This is the Rock Ape. It's a 45-liter pack. Same internal frame, same great padded straps that you like, with a few extra features. If you're wondering what's with all the crazy names, well, that's because finding 100% American made is as hard as finding Bigfoot in the woods. When you're ready to carry our packs, contact us at squatchsurvivalgear.com or any of our social medias.
Hey, what is going on, guys? Hey, are you enjoying the show? Are you just geeking out and binge watching every minute of Prometheus Lens Podcast that you've got available? And now you found yourself at the end of the line. You're like, man, I've seen them all. I'm all caught up. Now I just gotta wait till every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard for the lives. Hey, let me let you in on a little secret, man. We got this thing called the All Access Pass, and there is tons of exclusive members-only content there. We have all kinds of episodes. You get these episodes 48 hours early. You get monthly Q&As and access to the private Facebook community and so much more that is coming on down the line. And it's your way of supporting the show and help me to keep doing what I love to do and what you obviously enjoy. So head on over to the website, PrometheusLensPodcast.com, and sign up. See you guys on the other side.
Beyond the Cold War, I'd say that rocket technology, that came from the Germans, big pharma, drug programs, that fits into that. MK Ultra, CERN, and the particle colliders, that all goes back to the Nazis. And the list just kind of goes on from there. I mean, the reality is that this is a really big story that has yet to be fully told. That's what's really grabbed me about this. And, you know, what really shocked me in studying this was coming to the realization that the Nazis have this wild, deep, occult fascination. It's constantly running in the background. It seeped through everything they did, and it's not discussed. I mean, they had this fascination with the occult that fueled them to actively look for ancient technology. And this is running in, like I say, it's running in the background throughout the 30s and the 40s. These brilliant minds that we talked about, behind that are a lot of people who were really into the occult. And I mean, I think I might as well just throw this in here too, because this might be the right place to bring this up. I think your audience might appreciate this. The Watcher fallen angel tech that was given to mankind in Genesis 6, I think will fit into this. I think that they may have actually been looking for that, or at least traces of that technology. So I'm going to sprinkle that in today.
That's why I'm really excited to talk to you, because I just have a kind of overarching knowledge of it. I've just heard some people talk about it, but I don't really know no real specific details. I've not really went into this rabbit hole yet. So I'm really excited to hear, what you found, because like I said, my knowledge is very general. It's like I know the Indiana Jones stuff was actually kind of happening. They were looking for these holy relics because they thought they had power, and that they believed in this Uberman superior race with this, basically the way I interpret it was the Genesis 6 Nephilim, superhuman, and that they Hitler and a lot of the people that he followed was into Madame Blavatsky and her teachings, and she was into the occult and stuff like that. So that's just kind of my overarching knowledge of it, but I've not really looked into it. I don't know what Madame Blavatsky actually believed or taught, and the gritty details I'm unfamiliar with.
Yeah, well, you've got a great foundation already. All that stuff is interwoven in this. I think there's a lot of things that you just mentioned that will probably come back up, because that's all there, man. And that Indiana Jones thing 100% is there. I mean, I saw in an interview where a guy named Philip Kaufman, he was a screenwriter for, I think, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He said that he based Indiana Jones off of these relics that these Nazis were after. And specifically this society that's embedded in the Nazi party, which I'll talk about. Actually, I'll just give you one example right now. It's there's this group within the Nazis called Ahnenerbe. And I'll go more into that, but I'll just throw this in right now. Ahnenerbe went to Tiwanaku in Bolivia, which that's a site, as you know, that's attributed to Viracocha. Mm-hmm. Viracocha in Inca legends came out of the waters of Lake Titicaca and taught the native people there the secrets of agriculture, masonry, and astronomy. He also emerged from this lake right after like a cataclysm or a flood, and which I lean more towards it being like a flood. But he taught the survivors of this flood this old world tech, and it's very reminiscent of the story in Genesis, where we're talking about this hidden knowledge of the heavens and the earth given to the common man. The scripture that comes to mind for me is this: is Nephilim were in the earth in those days and after the flood. So I think the Nazis were attracted to this site, I think in part because of Viracocha and just the possibility of finding the old technology. And as you'll see today, they were very much prospectors of this technology. They wanted to have it. They wanted to get it in their hands. All the stuff that you've heard about, the Sphere of Destiny, it all ties into this. They really wanted this stuff because they regarded it as an ancient technology. And of course, they get to Tiwanaku. They're driven there by Viracocha and these legends, but they wanted to later attribute Tiwanaku to their ancient Atlantean ancestors. But that's also a story that draws inspiration from the giants of the north in the land of the Nephilim or Nephilim. Very close word there to Nephilim, right? So yeah. Even through the Nazis' particular spin on history, this is a story that parallels that of the Nephilim. And actually, one of the Nazis who went to Tiwanaku was Edmund Kiss. And I'll be throwing out names like this because just if people get a wild hair or they want to look into some of this, all they have to do is go look up these people's names today, and you'll see some validation for what I'm saying today. But Edmund Kiss wrote a book called The Last Queen of Atlantis, where he said that Tiwanaku was built by an old supernatural race that predated the natives in the region. So I'm starting to see this Nephilim tie in here with all this stuff. And I mean, just for transparency, I'll just tell you, like, I could do a version of this presentation and leave out Nephilim. But because, I know there's historians out there who aren't down with the Nephilim. And so I thought about, and some people consider it woo and fringe. So I thought about leaving it out to make this more historically airtight for some people. But whatever. I really think we should include it today. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, and even the archaeology follows it. Brian Forrester, one of his books that I got, it's called The Path of Viracocha. And that was an amazing read. Anybody that's not read that, I highly suggest you do. But he talks about the legends of Viracocha, and like you said, but he actually like documents all the towns that Viracocha had visited, and he draws this, draws it out on a map and shows you, and he calls that the path of Viracocha, and it's the path that he and his 7 sages, which were the Viracochun, which were mirrored images of the 7 sages of Egypt, the 7 fish gods of Mesopotamia and Oannes, all these, it's just another version of the same story, it seems. But when you follow that path, he lays out how at every single town that he stopped at, and the pathway lines all have megalithic structures, and that's where they find all of the elongated skulls. And he lays it out, man. He's like, obviously some are from headboarding, but he said, but people fail to ask the question, why? They were obviously trying to emulate someone or some race that they viewed as a god or highly venerated. And that's what he was saying. He said that Viracocha and his Viracochun were a hybrid race, and they had powers and knowledge, and they had these elongated skulls, and they ruled over the people, and that's why the people were headboarding and stuff, to try to emulate these people, this hybrid race.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite finds that Brian Forrester points out is this site on the edge of Lake Titicaca, where today all that's left are these 2 huge megalithic pillars, and there's a picture with somebody standing next to it, and they look to be about 20, possibly bigger, 20 feet tall, but they're what's left of a giant stone calendar circle, much like Stonehenge, right there on the banks of Lake Titicaca. So whoever built this, we're cooking with this ancient knowledge and technology for sure. I mean, Tiwanaku and the Nazis draw to that region. That's just one example of how these guys were looking for this stuff. I mean,
so how long was this guy down there? Was he like doing, archaeology, like digging and trying to find relics? And what was his mission down there, and how long was he there?
I don't remember how long he was there. He was there long enough to, I guess, satisfy his fascination with the region. He went down and talked to people, and looked at all the ancient sites and stuff. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of this stuff, and this is a good example. That book, the Last Queen of Atlantis that he wrote, I wasn't able to read that because it's still in German. It's not translated into English. That's why a lot of the stuff you don't ever hear about, because there's this wall of secrecy you got to get behind. And once you're back there, a lot of this stuff is in German. So I'd know a lot more about these specific instances, like their Tiwanaku expedition, if I could find the translated work, because these guys go in and they journal. That's how I know about a lot of this. But some of those journals are still in German, actually. So that one, I'm not sure, man. There's still a lot to dig into here and find out, as far as like how long he was there and what all he found. But he was there long enough to write this book and to do what Nazis do, which is kind of put their own spin on their findings. They have to make it, Himmler started the Ahnenerbe Society. I'll probably go into that more later, but they wanted to impress Himmler with their findings, and to do so, they kind of had to put this Nazi spin on it, to where it's like, hey, these ancient advanced people, they were here, yes, but they have to spin it like they were our ancestors, our Atlantean ancestors. So you have to kind of cut through a lot of BS with this too. But, I also came across another story, which was very bizarre. During the war, the Nazis had set up shop at a remote castle in the Czech Republic. And they had brought with them a huge occult library. They stocked it. They stocked this castle with Kabbalah and occult manuscripts. And from all the accounts that I've read, they were trying to use the natural energy of this site because of this giant cavern in the earth that it was built on. It's called Houska Castle. It's in the Czech Republic. And so they're drawn to this castle because of the lore surrounding it, essentially. And they bring all this occult stuff. And then one day, the locals in the area realized that the Nazis had just up and left in a hurry overnight. They just fly by night got out of there, and they left behind dead soldiers, which is very odd. That's not something they usually do. And they left these guys where they died. Like, there was a guy in the courtyard. He was still laying there. There was a dead Nazi in a chair. They just got out of there. So the locals go in and they see that there's this gigantic occult library in there. So the local legend became that the Nazis were in there and they were doing rituals, and they were real deep into this metaphysical stuff, and they actually like opened up a portal and let something through. And what came through scared them off and killed a couple of them. So, and I looked into the regional folklore around this particular castle, and I found some stuff like before the Nazis got there, they built a chapel over the cavern in the earth. The locals did, to block things from coming out, because they believed that the cavern was a pathway to the underworld that was once used by evil spirits to come into our world, essentially. And it was said that there was like all these creatures and cryptid-like entities, like Mothman almost, like characters that came out at night, because this thing, to them, to the locals, they said this hole in the earth had no bottom. It was just a giant, huge black hole. So, at this point in my research, I've got Tiwanakus, and I'm thinking, okay, these Nazis are sniffing around Veracocha's old stomping grounds. And I've got this story where the Nazis were storing occult manuscripts at a castle. I'm thinking, I just kind of sat back at this point, and I was just curious about how did it come to this? How did it come to a scenario like that? Why are they, doing this? Why are they putting occult books in an old castle out in the middle of nowhere? I just wanted to know the backstory. So that's really what kind of propelled me to even dive deeper into this. And there is a backstory. I mean, they were trying to rebuild ancient pagan Germania. And they early on got into some very weird stuff that they thought would help them do that. And that's what nobody talks about. And that's what really attracted me to this. And one of the things I found that was very interesting is that Churchill and some people in our government, after the war at Nuremberg, and the psyop that was, from what I can tell, they decided it would be too much of a weird distraction to go into the occult aspects of the Nazis. So they excluded that information. I think that's partly why this didn't make the history books. And after more research, one thing became very clear to me, and that was that leading up to the creation of the Nazi Party, you had this massive swell of occultists in Germany in the late early 1900s. And this is what smacked me in the face with this, because nobody ever talks about how Germany, before the Nazis take power, is this massive occult hub. I mean, even before World War I, the occult subculture in Germany and Vienna was fully developed. You go all the way back to 1880. The occultists in Germany were trying to revive the Bavarian Illuminati. In 1885, you mentioned her a minute ago, Helena Blavatsky, she shows up and starts leading the Theosophical Society. In 5 years after that, in 1890, Rudolf Steiner is in Vienna, kind of becoming this major figure of the occult subculture there. And once we get to the turn of the century, there was this swell where occultism in general was on the rise, and it was kind of in vogue. So by the time you're rolling into the 1900s, Germany has this dense, complex network of secret societies, and they're being led by all these famous occultists like Theodor Reuss. Actually, he's another big one. He was a main founder of the OTO in Germany. So I do want to highlight that the OTO comes out of Germany right before the Nazis take power. It's a huge part of this story. And
I never heard of that until I recently spoke with Zachary King, and he's an ex-occultist that's become a Christian, and he's been kind of making rounds on podcasts and stuff. And I seen him on Jonathan and Jacob's show, the Cult of Conspiracy, and so I had him on and give his testimony and stuff, and it gets pretty dark, man. But I think it's definitely something that needed to have a flashlight shown on it to a lot of Christians that's just kind of in the dark or in denial about this kind of stuff. So yeah, that was the first time I'd ever even heard of the OTO.
Yeah. Occultists know what the OTO is. That's for sure, because it's such an integral part of the way the occult operates today. The OTO, when that came around in the late 1800s in Germany, it kind of shifted the way people did occult stuff. Really, it was just like a very pivotal moment for occultists. They kind of set a lot of standards, and it goes back to this Theodor Reuss guy, and he, in addition to being in the OTO, I do want to point out that he was in all these other orders, because he was also a Mason. So this stuff goes hand in hand with some of these other major orders that people have heard of. Reuss is a Mason. He was working with the Brotherhood of Saturn. He was working with William Westcott and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. He was also working with Aleister Crowley, and he was adopting many of Crowley's teachings. He knew Crowley, and he was a fan of Crowley. And they have a few stories that I found. I mean, to validate that. There's one story where Reuss comes up to Crowley's house in the middle of the night and says, you've found the secret of Freemasonry, and you're telling everybody. Why are you telling everybody? And Crowley responds and says he doesn't know what he's talking about, because Crowley maintained that he stumbled across the secret of Freemasonry like unwittingly, like on accident. So they developed a friendship out of this, because Crowley ended up impressing Reuss with his ability to unlock secrets. And this, I throw that in because I want to highlight this aspect that there is this huge occult matrix happening in Germany right before the Nazis take power, and that these guys are kind of key figures in that. There's a story later where in 1920, Reuss promotes Crowley in Zurich at the World Federation of Universal Freemasonry. It's this huge gathering. All these German occultists are there. Reuss goes there pushing for the adoption of Crowley's Gnostic Mass to become the official religion for everybody in Freemasonry. It wasn't adopted, but there were members of the Thule Society there at this event. These are guys who were about to become Nazis, and they were exposed to Crowley's doctrine. And I'll just go ahead and say this now. Thule is important because it became the German Workers' Party, which then officially became known as the Nazi Party.
The party within the party, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Like the Illuminati with the Freemasons.
Yeah. And that's what's happening in Germany at this time. This Thule Society that will become the Nazi Party is a bunch of guys who are in all these other orders that are just networking. They're at this Freemason conference networking, and they're hearing about Crowley, and they're talking about doctrines and all this stuff. And all those guys, a lot of those guys in attendance were about to become Nazis. So it's just this interesting tie-in where future Nazi leadership was at least aware of Crowley and his doctrine. And I just wanted to add that in because I never hear anybody talking about that. And it's out of this occult matrix that this Thule Society was molded and formed. It was actually formed 2 years before this Zurich Freemason conference. So they were there. They were in attendance. They were there along with all these other occultists in Europe. And I just can't drive this point enough. These secret societies know each other. They networked. It was a huge web. It was like a mafia boss funeral. They're all there. They all know each other. And this is the environment in Germany that the Nazi Party was sort of created and incubated out of. Occultism is just off the charts in Germany, building up to when the Nazis took power. And those two guys who founded the Thule Society, they were Walter Neuhaus and Rudolf von Sabbatendorf. They were very much a part of this German occult network because they were also Freemasons. They were in what's called the Bektashi Order. They were in the Order of the Teutons. They were in the Bavarian German Orden of the Holy Grail. And on top of all that, Sabbatendorf was also a Sufi Eastern mystic, and he wrote a book on the ancient Turkish Freemasonry as well. So these guys are into all of this stuff, all these influences, and they incorporate all these influences, and they start the Thule Society, which that's where we get the Nazis.
So with Hitler, was this something that he was into also, and just met with like-minded people and decided to take over the world? Or was this something like where Hitler came into politics and into power and then was influenced by this inner circle of people?
Hitler was definitely influenced by all this networking of occultists that was going on. I mean, he built his revolution in the beer halls and the Freemason get-togethers. So Hitler was actually brought into the party by an occultist named Dieter Eckhart. So he was very much a part of this. Some historians will argue that Hitler did not like the occult. I've heard that on many World War II documentaries, because I think because of, they cite one line, I think, in his book Mein Kampf, where he seems to kind of diss the occult, but it's like, who are we kidding here? He built his party with occultists, and he put occultists in the top positions in the party. I mean, all the top guys to Hitler were occultists. So, and also, man, to answer your question, like, was he an occultist himself? I think he did include some of that in his life. I think he was into some of this stuff. I don't think he was as far into it as some of the other guys in the Third Reich. That I'll say this, it was Hitler's idea to incorporate the red and black flag with the swastika. And to me, that indicates that he was at least aware of the power of symbolism.
Well, even that old saying, birds of a feather flock together.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the guy that's never been busted for drugs, but you're running around, all your friends have rap sheets, 4 inches thick, and all been to prison and got caught for doing drugs or dealing drugs. You're not just the nice clean guy hanging out with the druggies. You just not been busted yet.
Yeah, for sure.
And he might have said stuff like that just to throw people off.
Yeah, he was very much like that too. Plus, he was worried about early on. He's doing political stuff. He's crafting this narcissistic playbook. He's doing interviews. He's doing public appearances. And then once the war starts, he's engulfed in like battle plans and just this war. He was a very busy person, but all the major people around him in the Reich were occultists. I mean, so you've got all this mesh of occultism happening. And then by the time you get to the 40s in Germany, most of Nazi Germany, actually, including the civilian members of the party, were actively embracing some form of pagan mysticism. So even if Hitler himself wasn't driving this fascination with the occult, it was happening all around him. I mean, Himmler, Rosenberg, and actually Rosenberg, he was the head of Nazi foreign affairs. He was openly neo-pagan. He actually has a quote where he comments on the embrace of the occult among the German people. He said that many Germans, due to their proclivity for the mystical and the occult, came to understand the success of National Socialism. And when I read that quote, what really hits me with that is that he's basically saying that people see value. The German people saw value in mixing the occult with this Nazi nationalist socialism. And I mean, he's one of the guys at the head of this operation. He was openly neo-pagan, and all of the other top guys were also in this Thule Society or were occultists. I mean, even Hermann Göring was number 2 in the Reich at one point. He was in Thule Society. The other guy who was number 2 at one point was Rudolf Hess. He was in the Thule Society. Himmler, who also was said to be number 2 for a while, he was just a flat out occultist. So it's almost like Hitler let these guys fight for number 2, so they weren't fighting for his spot, but they're all occultists. So, and because of guys like Rosenberg, Hess, and Himmler, the spirit in the air around the whole party is an overall rejection of Judaism and Christianity, and it's an embrace of this New Age pagan mysticism. I mean, I'm so
glad you said that, because that was what I was about to hit on, because I was like, it's the whole Deuteronomy 32. It's the fallen sons of God that was given dominion over the nations and the peoples of the world. And of course, they hate Christianity and God's chosen people. And that's why they attacked them so viciously and went after them and just wanted to exterminate them. Like we talked about on your show, it's Genesis 3:15. It's the seed war. And even the spirits, the sons of God that are over that region, it's, they have different gods and different names, but the characteristics and stuff all stay the same, because especially like around the Black Sea, you have the Caucasus Mountains, Prometheus, and then the stories of Medea, the witch Medea, and the Promethean fire, and all that stuff. So it's like, this is the same old song and dance, man. I mean, some caveats and names might have changed, but it's the same entity pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Yeah. And I think these top guys in the regime behind the scenes were into the heavy, dark stuff. And then it kind of spread out and it covered this nation like a blanket. I mean, towns across Germany started reviving these old pagan parades. This affinity for the old occult ways was just spread out all across Germany. And I'll just throw this in and I'll get off of the political stuff, but like there's an interesting phenomenon you see here with these guys in the top ranks where they were taking Karl Marx, who was a German, by the way. They were taking this quote of his where he said, "Religion is the opium of the masses." And Goebbels and Himmler took that "religion is the opium of the masses" and used it. They weaponized it because they understood the power of religion. So they built up this state religion of Nazism that behind the scenes is being fueled by the occult. And they just steeped Nazi socialism in this very particular occult aesthetic that's reminiscent of these old pagan Germanic tribes of the Teutoburg Forest who were Edomites, which I think is why they brought back these pagan festivals for the people to start actively engaging with in all their towns. You know, they were after this old, like you said, this same old story, this old playbook. They're just reviving something that the ancients did here. That's what this kind of goes back to. Himmler was obsessed with a 2,000-year-old book called the Germania. It's called, in some circles, it's called the Nazi Bible. And it was written in 98 AD by the Roman historian Tacitus. The original title of the book was actually Origin and Situation of the Germans. And it's about this group called the Germania from this region that would become northern Germany. But get this, they were warriors. They were tall warriors. They were robust. And they had blonde hair and blue eyes. I think there might be some Nephilim connections here as well because Tacitus says that this is a group that the Roman Empire could not conquer, although they tried 3 times. So you don't hear that every day. Usually the Roman Empire could conquer you. They tried with this group 3 times and they gave up. They had respect for them. And you see this in some of the old Roman historical accounts. They came up against groups like this. A lot of them were probably descendants of the Nephilim because I think even the Scythians, the Romans said that they had to take them out at the knees because they were giants basically. And then these guys, they just couldn't even conquer them. They're tall, they're robust. And this is also the kind of thing that Himmler was trying to reinfuse in the culture, was this connection to these warrior pagan ancestors. And they actually have an ancient site there in northern Germany called Extenchina, where these Germania are from. It's an ancient temple built into these natural rock formations in the middle of this Teutoburg Forest. And it's this sacred, supercharged place with strange engravings, and the vibe of it, it's just like, it reminds me of that part in Jasher where it talks about artifacts and edifice rocks that the Watchers had encoded knowledge in. And the knowledge was
Jubilees. Yeah.
Okay.
Jubilees.
Is that Book of Jubilee? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And right where the knowledge was like meant for a later time. So it was like stored in this rock, almost like an ancient computer or something. Right.
Yeah.
And it's right there in this area where this unconquered Edomite, possibly Nephilim tribe was. And the Nazis were going to take that ancient site and return to the pagan traditions and do like Nazi Bohemian Grove stuff there. They had big plans for this site, you know? So this is where I might want to pick your brain a little bit too, because there's a book I came across in my research by Yair Davidly. It's called Edom in Germany, and it connects Hitler and the Nazis to a cult of Esau and the Edomites. And I think that this site kind of fits the bill for that group. But what stands out to me is that this is a group from the line of Esau. And I don't know, what do you think about that with the Edomites and stuff? I kept coming across information that led me to think that these old German tribes were some of them were most definitely Edomite. I was just wondering if you've seen that.
No, I've not really like deep dived on the genealogy on how like they spread out and where they'd went, but I'm sure a lot of them spread out and moved about and probably made their way up there. And I kind of talked about on your show, one thing I did discover, I'm not saying this is every case, but the Jewish people used Edomites kind of as a like a catch-all term or an epithet of an adversary of God's people. They even referred to the Romans as Edomites because they were a thorn in the side of God's people and an adversary to God's people. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's 100% the way it is all the time, but that is an aspect of it. But one thing I do find particular is that, Esau was this hairy, quote unquote man married into Nephilim giant tribes and was breeding, having offspring. And like we talked about in the show, they bred the Amalekites, who were, sorcerers and necromancers, and their name means blood liquor. And God talking about giving all these, do not do this, do not do that. And it was, don't drink the blood, don't sacrifice your children to the fire, don't seek necromancers. No longer will you sacrifice to these hairy goat demons. And so you had this tall, big, and hairy gene getting spread. And I'm sure, there were some people that broke off from the tribe and ventured off up north and in various places. So it's quite possible that bloodline made its way up there. And that's why you get the stories with the Vikings and lots of the Scythians. They were tall and they were hairy and they were fierce warriors and practiced cannibalism and things like that. And you see those kind of common themes spread out through that area. One of the things that I talked about that I found fascinating was you found almost 100% carbon copy of that in Sardinia. And that's the island that's off the coast of Italy there. And there on the winter solstice, they had this festival, and they had these guys that dressed themselves in black goat's fur and carved wooden masks, and they called them the Methones or the Methanes. And they would dance through the town and they would abduct women. And then the kids that were coming of age during this festival, they lit a huge bonfire and the kids had to pass through the fire. And then you have all these legends of the Black Sea area of Medea, and she was a sorcerer and done sacrifices and drank blood and talked about, even in that story of Jason and the Argonauts, a lot of people, when they read the English, don't get the full story. But when you read the Greek account, there's some stuff hidden in there, some occult stuff that if you don't know what to look for, you'll miss it. Because when Medea gives him this spell and tells him to do this spell before he plants the dragon's teeth in the field that springs forth all these zombie creatures he has to defeat. It's like his first trial he has to do to make his way to earn the golden fleece. But she gives him these incantations and these potions and this rite that he has to do that makes him invincible. But it's a Promethean fire ritual. He has to bathe in this blue like fire that burns off his impurities and makes him invincible. So you have all this, necromantic and sorcery, blood ritual stuff spreading out. That's all stemming from this line, I believe.
Yeah. It just got me thinking when I came across this information, because it's like you've got the two brothers, Jacob and Esau. Jacob becomes the first Israelite. In fact, his name at the end of his life is changed to Israel. So, and his brother is Esau, who becomes known as Edom in some passages, and he's the first of the Edomites. So if Jacob's the first Israelite and his brother Esau is the first Edomite, you're seeing in scripture the creation of these two different kingdoms. And this is what got me thinking, was like, if these German people are really this Edomite bloodline, you've got this bloodline feud sort of rearing its head again in 1940, where in World War II, one group is committing genocide on the other group. And because of, and if you want to go even deeper with that, because of Hitler and the Germans and the genocide and all the monstrosities that they did, it resulted in the creation of Israel right after the war in 1948. So these groups are maybe still intertwined in this human story still to this day. It's like this stuff goes way back and way deep into prophecy, even if you really want to take it there. And another thing too is like the British royal family are German. They started hiding the fact that they were German after Hitler because of all the shame that he brought to the German people. But the British royal family is German. And that's specifically that royal family is that's a Nephilim bloodline that is preserved through the German tribes, I think, for sure. It's they even tied in the Muhammad, the prophet, which is interesting because I got this whole thing on Petra that connects the Edomites to the Muslim world through an Edomite king named King Herod. I mean, so it's like how deep do you want to go? But there's another.
His third wife was from Ishmael, and all Muslim nations trace their lineages to Ishmael, and he was also the eldest son that was screwed out of his inheritance.
Wow. Yeah. Well, there's another group of these blonde-haired, blue-eyed people that the Nazis were also tracking down. And they were originally from the Middle East. And it's this group that ended up in the Canary Islands. And the backstory is that we know that I think we talked about this yesterday, the Phoenicians and the Canaanites were either straight up Nephilim or were overrun by Nephilim. And they were two groups that were very much into this Nephilim dark magic belief system. And it said that the Romans found the Canaanites so vile that they just killed them. The Romans didn't want to integrate. They would integrate with some of the cultures that they conquered. With the Canaanites, they said no. They said kill them all. We can't integrate with these people. They're so vile. So the Canaanites were driven out. Many times throughout history, they're driven out of the Middle East, and it's thought that some of them went to the Canary Islands and became the Gaunches. The Gaunches were these white, blonde hair, blue-eyed people, and the Nazis were fixated on them. So the Nazis went to the Canary Islands and were looking into this ancient culture, and it's a bloodline specifically that they seem to be interested in because of maybe a DNA strand. I mean, even in the show,
one thing that stood out to me was when you was talking about that. I think it was the Book of Enoch. It talks about the birth of Moses, and it says that his father is kind of freaked out by his appearance and goes to Methuselah and tells Methuselah, I think my wife has lain with an angel, because he's basically, the way it describes it that I remember is that he was white, blonde hair and blue eyes, and had like a glow about him, that he was something supernatural and different, and that his father associated that with heavenly beings, the Genesis 6 people, because he said, my wife is lain with an angel. I don't think he's mine. He's white, and he's blonde hair and blue eyed and got a glowing countenance. And then Methuselah puts him at ease and said, no, this is yours. He's just, blessed and highly favored of God.
Yeah. There's another guy I want to mention here too that the Germans were very interested in. They actually kind of pulled him in. Himmler met a warlock at a Nordic conference named Carl Williget. And this guy was obsessed with this Germanic prehistory. He believed that the German culture went back 200,000+ years BC. And he said that they come out of this time where there were 3 suns and the earth was inhabited by giants and dwarfs and these other mythical creatures. And this guy, Williget, claimed that he could go into like a trance or go into this astral realm and channel these ancestors from 200,000 years back. And these guys, the Nazis loved this guy. They welcomed him in. He was doing personal fortune telling for Hitler, for Goebbels, and for Himmler. And he became this shaman of the Third Reich. And he tied the German origins to the pagan legends of this great civilization in the north, where this group of supernatural people once lived. It's the idea that the Aryans came from the Arctic 200,000 years ago. That's what they believed. They believed it was a civilization that sunk into the sea. So it's very Atlantis-like in that regard. And you see these ties to the Nordic legends here of the ice giants and the Valkyries, who were goddesses who resided in the land of the Nephilim, which I think I mentioned earlier. That every time I see that, I think of Nephilim because the word is so similar.
And they were described as giants.
Yes.
Yeah. And their legends is that, I'm trying to think of his name, is Miamir or Myamir was like one of the first creations, and he was a giant. And then here come this other creation, and it was more like humanoid, regular sized person, but had supernatural abilities and powers, and kills Miamir and busts him into pieces and uses him to create the universe and Earth, much like the Enuma Elish with Marduk and Tiamat.
Mm-hmm.
He kills her and busts her into a bunch of pieces and uses her body parts to form everything. So you have that kind of similar story there.
Yeah. It's, I kept finding these, this old culture that these guys kept going back to, and this old belief system, all that mythology, they either believed it or they took it and tried to incorporate it into this Nazi mythos that they were creating. And it was really driven by Himmler. He's one of the main guys in the Nazis who was pushing this stuff. Himmler was huge. That's why I didn't focus a whole lot on Hitler, because once you look into some of these other guys, you realize it doesn't matter what Hitler thinks about the occult. It's out of his control at this point. All his top
Hitler
guys
was just a face man.
Yeah. I really thought that I was going to have to focus on Hitler to kind of, I don't know, make this make sense to people, and I don't. I don't think I do, because I think, for one, Himmler is driving this so hard. It's just Hitler becomes a shadow in the background, And that,
and also that prophet guy you was talking about, it reminds me kind of like John Dee.
Yeah.
You know, he became the prophet and the science alchemist guy, the head go-to person to the crown. And he was into summoning and witchcraft and all this occult stuff, and was being visited by this thing that sounds like Yoda from Star Wars, this little green sage man. And that's what he even called it. His name was Yoda. And it's like these people that are into this sort of thing, they're tapping into the same realm, into the same spirits. And to me, just my general knowledge was like, well, that's where they're getting all this knowledge and wisdom from. They're tapping into these Nephilim spirits, these fallen sons of God, and they're giving them this pre-flood knowledge. And that's how they had all this advanced technology and knowledge. That's where it came from. Are you of the same opinion?
I'm getting there. Yeah, I am actually. Actually, yes, I am. But I'm trying to figure out, if I put this into a book and make a book out of this, how deep I'm going to go into that. But I'll worry about that later. I know that some people aren't there yet with this. But yeah, I think that's my hunch. Yeah, I'm leaning towards that too. Everything comes out of this. Everything they were doing, the Nazis, comes out of these originally comes out of these occult ideas, usually from way back in the myth. I mean, even the whole thing where the Nazis were trying to keep that German blood pure, like they were extremely racist in that regard, that comes out of this Germania tribe, and it comes from Himmler. Himmler was reading Tacitus, who wrote that the Edomite Germania tribe did not breed with other races. They didn't allow other ethnicities in. That's why the Nazis incorporated that into their regime. And in addition to these pagan legends, Himmler was also obsessed with this idea of blood and soil, which comes out of German folk culture called the Volkisch movement. And it's very closely related to the old occult practices of soothsaying and divination. And basically it was the thought that people should live close to nature in a more folk tribe setting where they could realistically exclude the mixture of other races. But it goes back to this Germania tribe of old that Rome couldn't conquer. They're getting everything from the old school stuff. And so that's what these guys are into. I mean, it's out of this fascination with all this old occult stuff that Himmler creates the Ananerbe Society that I mentioned earlier. That's this esoteric society. They have state funding, and they're doing these archaeological expeditions all over the world, hunting secrets, relics, and ancient technology. And this is, I don't know, have you ever heard of the Ahnenerbe? I always ask people.
Like I said, I just kind of had a little general knowledge on this subject.
You're not alone. Most people have not heard of this. That's why I always ask, and most people don't know anything about this. This is an aspect of history that has been totally hidden and brushed over. I think it's the bread and butter of why I even care about these occult origins. I think this ties it all together. I looked into it. I found that Ahnenerbe had 46 department heads. And some of the numbers I've read said that 16 of those were professors and 19 held doctorates. So they're scholars. They're very well qualified archaeologists. And it's because of their knowledge of ancient relics, ancient myths, tribes, lands, all that. They're brought into the SS under this Ahnenerbe program. And they got some big names too for the time. They had a guy in Ahnenerbe they brought in named Herbert John Kuhn. He was a very serious archaeologist of the day, and he was respected for his work with Viking excavations. And right, and I see that fitting into this whole Valkyrie, Nephilim, and all that. But when he was brought in, he added this seriousness to the whole operation. And you could honestly say that these were academic Indiana Jones professor archaeologist types that made up this Ananerbe Society. They really had a guy looking for the Grail too. They had a guy named Otto Rahn. I think Himmler handpicked him specifically because of his knowledge on the Grail. And plus they wanted the Grail so bad. This was one of the main relics that they wanted to get their hands on. But they were also looking for Aryan kings in Iran. They were looking for the remnants of Atlantis and the Canary Islands, of course. They were also looking for elongated skulls in Venezuela because they thought those were Atlantean. And the more I got into this, the more I realized they were aware of and looking into bloodlines.
Yeah,
for sure.
They were hip to the knowledge that we're just now starting to rediscover.
Yeah. To the point where they were measuring people's faces in Tibet. They went to what's called the Forbidden City of Lhasa in Tibet, where all these old manuscripts are held. There's a library there that has 28,000 old texts. Most of them are unknown to the Western world. The Nazis found out about that, and they went there, and they thought that the Tibetan people who are advanced and hip to this ancient technology, they thought that they were their ancestors, that they came from Atlantis. That was their take on it. But they're inspecting these people on a genetic level, investigating the bloodlines. And I think that the God Kings and the Nephilim, I think they're all a part of this because, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they were obsessed with Iran. They thought that their ancestors came from Iran, and it's in that region where we see Gilgamesh and the tomb of Gilgamesh come out, and all these ancient God Kings. So I think that they were aware of that.
Yeah, and then you got the WikiLeaks emails with Hillary Clinton that when they discovered the tomb of Gilgamesh / Nimrod, Saddam Hussein, like a big dummy, bragged about it and told the whole world. And then within like a month, we went over there and quote unquote freed Iraq. But you got the emails of Hillary Clinton specifically asking if they required the body of Gilgamesh. And you have that video footage of that special secret service, whatever group landed at this museum and stormed in and grabbed items and ran.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of those items in that Baghdad museum there that went missing, well, first of all, there's accounts of people saying that they were either part of the troop or they were witness to the troop of Americans that went into the museum and took out a lot of these artifacts. And at that museum is where the Epic of Gilgamesh was held, and a lot of this old stuff. And I think what we saw there was our troops and the U.S. government going in and going after the type of stuff that the Nazis were doing back in the 40s. Same playbook.
That whole Operation Paperclip, they come over here and told our government the insider secrets, and now that's how we had such an explosion of technology. And now secretly we're going after these same relics and trying to use eugenics and DARPA super soldier programs and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's just transferred here. It's just they've gotten really good at hiding it and having all these three-letter organizations that are privately funded, just like the whole UAP thing now. You know, they have all these court hearings and Congress meetings and all this stuff, and even our congressmen can't get answers because there's so much red tape with these three-letter agencies, and they're privately funded, and the money's all been whitewashed. And yeah, I mean, it's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I'm glad you mentioned Paperclip again there too, because the guys in this Ahnenerbe Society were definitely a part of that at the end of the war. All these guys went on to become scholars at major universities around the world, right at the end of the war. So even though that they held the title of SS Nazis, none of them served any jail time. They just kind of quietly got repurposed and replaced at universities, and this whole thing has all but been erased from history. I mean, it's taken me forever to find out some of this stuff. I've had to do some of the deepest research I've ever in my whole life. I've had to face like impossibilities to uncover some of this. It's there. You just have to. It's just been very well hidden. I mean, one of the expeditions they did, I'll throw this in because I don't know, for me, this really solidified this occult connection. The Ananerbe Society did a very strange expedition to this region called Karelia. And it's this very mystical region between Finland and Russia. I did research on the area. It's fascinating. You just mentioned, I think, UFOs. This is a region that has some of the craziest UFO stuff. And it's just old forest. People do things the old way there. It's a place known to still harbor old sorcerers. And basically, Himmler read an article in the 40s in a German newspaper about this, what's called Kalevala folklore that comes out of this region, which, funny enough, a lot of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien he based Lord of the Rings off of this Finnish Kalevala that comes out of this region. So Himmler's reading this article, and it's written by this nobleman author named Eero von Gronhagen. And basically what Himmler comes to understand from this article is that the Kalevala is very strong in this region, and that the people in the forest are still practicing it, and they're still doing these ancient ways. So Himmler contacts this guy, Gronhagen, to lead an expedition there. He brings it into the Ahnenerbe and does it all up officially. And the mission is for these guys to go in and to look specifically for folk magic, to record incantations of pagan sorcerers and witches. They want the chants. They actually want this audible, they want to make a recording. So Gronhagen takes a Nazi musicologist named Fritz Bose with him. They bring a magnetophone to record these pagan chants and incantations because they regarded this, I think, as a spiritual technology. And they went into the region and they got recordings. This is on the books. They got over 100 recordings. And they documented that when they went in there, they found an old witch who came out to meet them and said that she was waiting for them. She told the Nazis she saw them coming 3 days earlier in a vision. So she comes out to meet them. And they get into this forest and they start having all these weird encounters, and like they meet like a guy who's never seen a train before or been out of the forest. It's all these people in there who are just untouched by time. You know, it's like it's like we probably know
wild
people,
men and women, feral people.
We might know some people in Appalachia like that, but you know, that's just one example of what I could find that this Ahnenerbe did. There's a lot more. Like I said, there's a lot more of this stuff, and it's in because these guys went on to publish works because they go on to become professors and scholars. They publish books. That's part of the gig. A lot of it's in German, though. That's why this is. I think it's just now maybe starting to surface more. And the Ahnenerbe, I do want to say this, they went all over the world. They went, all over. But they really, really focused in on these places in the north. They went to the North Pole looking for treasure. In 2016, actually, I think Norway found an old Nazi base at the North Pole. They called it Scheissgraber, which is German for treasure hunter. So they were up there. They went to Sweden. They did go to Antarctica. And you'll hear people say, "Oh, that was just a scientific expedition." Yeah, but except these Nazi scientists are occultists who are into these old myths and this old occult practice. They're a lot of these guys believed in witchcraft, which includes channeling and all that. So yeah, it was a scientific expedition.
The amalgamation of all the watch your secrets.
Yeah.
Because, if you do take that Deuteronomy 32 worldview, the sons of God were divided and given dominion and territories. And of course, they're passing their knowledge and their secrets to the people under their control. So it's like they're going around and gathering all the different puzzle pieces of this fallen angel watcher, mysticism, technology, sorcery, whatever kind of verbiage you want to put on it. But it's like they were going around the world trying to gather all of this occult knowledge and wisdom from these various fallen sons of God, and any kind of relics or technology. They were just trying to gather all this stuff together. And as far as biblically concerned, it's prophetic for revelation. It's the gathering of the one world government, the one world religion, and Satan's army at the end. I mean, that was Satan and his cohorts trying to bring about the final battle, and just God snuffed it out.
Yeah,
because they don't know when. They're always trying to, get that checkmate.
Yeah, there's a phrase that I've come across studying up on some of the old occult stuff, and that is that the symbols are the language of the mysteries. And I see the Nazis very much in tune with that and kind of following that as almost like a prototype for a lot of the work they did, because one of the things they did in Sweden was they were looking at ideograms and ancient symbols carved into the rocks. And then even in their own backyard, they have this site called China. And I think they were very much, and there's a lot of carvings at China. I probably didn't mention that. There's mystery. There's mystery. There's runes. There's a whole side plot of this that goes into the Nordic runes. They were 100%. They designed that SS symbol after a Nordic rune. So they were very much into that too. But at China, that's this sacred spot in this Teutoburg forest associated with these Edomite Germania tribe. It has all these mystery carvings that nobody know who put them there or why. They're just steeped in esoteric mystery, and the Nazis were all about that. And I just think above all, Himmler specifically, and this Ananerbe Society, they wanted to find war-winning, supernatural, powerful, ancient technology and relics. That was the name of the game. That was the name of the game. I mean, they really wanted to find this stuff. They used the castles. I want to tie this in because I gave that castle story earlier on. They were using the castles to store this stuff. Himmler had a remote castle. It's called the Castle of Wewelsburg, where he's putting occult symbolism on everything. It's still there to this day. There's black sun symbolism engraved in the marble in there. And this became a ceremonial ritual spot for the SS. And Williget, that that prophetic shaman guy that they love. They made him a high priest of the ceremonies done at this SS castle, and they fashioned that whole SS unit actually after the Teuton Order and the Knights Templar. So this group and this castle, it becomes headquarters for all this crazy pagan stuff. And they got this warlock in charge, and they actually had a room in that castle called the Grail Room. And they had erected a shrine there, and they temporarily were storing a crystal on display in the shrine. It was meant to be replaced with the Grail when they found it. That's how strong their intentions were to find that artifact.
Man.
And they actually had a whole portion of that castle that was a museum dedicated to some of these other, what they regard to be supernatural relics. And they also, the Nazis had the Spear of Destiny, actually. I think at one point it was possibly stored here at this castle as well. They obtained the Spear of Destiny early on. It was in the Hoffmann Museum in Austria. It's what's believed to be the Spear of Destiny. Let me put it like that. Hitler had this. This is another thing. He had a fascination with the Spear of Destiny that went back to his childhood. Hitler has said that he thought that, because he's from Austria, so I think that he was either went to see the spear or he was aware of it because it was in his country. He had this very strange fascination with it, where he said he had dreams about the Spear of Destiny, and he said that he actually got downloads from it. That wasn't the way he worded it, but he was talking about how he got some sort of he was given thoughts to help to build the empire, and those thoughts originated from the Grail. So he had this weird fascination with, the Spear of Destiny. He had this weird fascination with it, but I've got to throw this into the Ahnenerbe the Ahnenerbe teams would follow behind the German invading army to collect these artifacts and manuscripts. So when the Germans would invade a place, and people have to remember, they took most of Europe. When the invading army came through a town or a village or a city, once everything was clear, Ahnenerbe comes in right behind the troops, and they start collecting this stuff. Yes. And
not only relics, but ancient books and knowledge. And
100%. They actually they wanted the art from the museums. That was a big thing. We know that the Nazis took art and money and gold and all that, but they raided, before they raided the museums, they raided the Freemason lodges, because they wanted this esoteric knowledge above everything else.
Yeah, that's
where their priorities were. When Hitler took Paris specifically, they raided the lodges first there. And I looked into this, and it's crazy. When they got to Paris in the 40s, this is the number I heard. There was close to 50,000 Freemasons in Paris at the time when the Nazis rolled in. I think it's possible that the whole French government in the 40s was almost entirely Freemason. And the Nazis ran them off. They ran them off. They took their material, which is a lot, and they ran them off because they were somewhat threatened by them. Because I think Hitler, because he started his revolution by attending these secret meetings, often at Freemason places or with Freemasons in the room, I think he didn't want them to uprise in the way that he did, because his revolution was formed out of these secret meetings. So he didn't want the Masons conspiring to overthrow him. So what they did, they killed.
Yeah, you had the French Revolution, you had the American Revolution, all that stuff was sprung from Freemasons. they're the ultimate revolutionaries.
Yeah. And they knew that. And they were threatened by that. And in fact, in Berlin, they made two of the biggest Freemason lodges the headquarters of the Gestapo. And they just took the basement. They made it bulletproof, so the stuff held there would be protected. And they just put in all this occult literature in the basement, and it became a headquarters for the Gestapo and a research center for all this Freemasonic stuff that they gathered. And so it's an interesting convergence of the state with the occult in that regard, because you've gotten one building, the Gestapo, with all this esoteric knowledge. But
yeah, it's just amazing, man. I appreciate you coming on and laying some of this stuff out, man. If there's any more rabbit trails you'd like to go down, man, I'd love to have you back and go even deeper on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to. Anytime, I'd love to be back on. I'll just wrap it up with this. They gathered all this material and they sent the rest out to these castles in Poland and the Czech Republic, parts of Germany. Their idea was to take the esoteric stuff, fortify it, because the castles were remote. They had this idea that the castles wouldn't be bombed. So they wanted a place where they could safely store and study this material. And that was one of the biggest takeaways for me in studying this is how they distributed information. And they had the biggest occult library in all of Europe. So there's way more to it.
Information.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. Information is power. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Yep, and religion is, a powerful thing. If you can get people to believe something adamantly, and that they have a divine entity overseeing them, and they got a divine destiny, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, people will do some crazy things in the name of religion and their God. Look at. I could name off several instances of people that's done some crazy stuff in the name of religion. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think witchcraft played into all this as well. I know I didn't focus heavily on that today, but once you get into this and you start realizing how they set things up at these castles for the study of this stuff, you realize that they had to have gone into the witchcraft stuff as well. So just to make it full circle there, that story I told about the castle earlier on, where it's almost as if something from the other side came through and spooked these guys and killed a couple of them. They had the knowledge in the books to potentially tap into that kind of stuff. And witchcraft was definitely on the table. And all of this, just to wrap it up, I would say I call it repurposed myth. It's a blend of real history and embellished history that the Nazis used to sort of curate their beliefs. And they did this with almost everything. They did it with the occult, for sure. It's just a big key to understanding the Nazis. They took a lot from other cultures and included into their mythos. And I think we'll see more information on this. Only new stuff's only going to emerge from here, I think. It's just the occult connections for me are just undeniable at this point. So I'm hoping to see more stuff in the future come out about this.
Yeah, especially if some people that translate some of these German texts into English, that would be really enlightening as far as going deeper and finding out some more information. Well, Tim, before we go, just let everybody know where they can find you if they want to search up your podcast, websites, or anything you want to plug. Now's your chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and thanks for having me on and letting me go through some of this today. I know it's a lot of information, so hopefully I didn't just info dump on everybody. Hopefully there's something that people can take away from this. And I certainly appreciate your input. I mean, you have you have some very valuable research that you're working with, man. And I always love to hear your insights on stuff. So I'm glad that you were able to jump in here and you've got me thinking about some stuff today. There's some stuff that you said that has got me thinking, like, I'm going to go and look into some stuff when we're done here today. But so I appreciate it. And I'm Tim Constantine. My podcast is Sixth Sensory Podcast. I'm on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and Instagram.
Nice. You got a website or anything like that, or just the socials?
No website, just Instagram. Shadow banned, but it's still there. So
yeah, keep your nose to the grindstone. The people that are actually searching will find you, man. They're looking. Yeah. Tim, thank you, man, for sharing not only your research but your time, and I enjoy our conversations. And definitely this is the first of many, because like you said, when you get people that share the same passions and the research, and they kind of just dovetail off each other, and you have these good conversations, you can't get enough of this, man. I enjoy it thoroughly.
Yeah, same here, brother.
All right, guys, thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed that. Be sure to check out Tim and his work for more deep dives on all this stuff. As you can see, he is a well-researched guy. He blew my mind. You guys are used to me talking a lot more in these episodes. I wasn't talking that much because I was listening. But yeah, be sure to check him out, guys. And hey, just remember, the difference between the known and the unknown is the journey. So good journey, guys.